My name is Mark Pillar. I'm the founder of a company called Backendless. We are located in Dallas, Texas, which is where I am right now. And I wanted to give you a quick overview of what Backendless is and why I think it is important for JavaScript developers. So first of all, as far as just general overview, it is a development and runtime platform. But to give you an idea of what Backendless, the kind of problem that it solves, uh, what previously what we did is was the integration, client server integration, providing a server that integrates client side with the server side and basically solves the problems of remote procedure calls, data management, retrieving data from databases, and so on. So when we looked at how developers write server-side code, uh, it was pretty quite obvious that many different projects, the same kind of code had to be developed over and over again. Clearly, the business logic was different, but the basic code to work with data, to work with messaging, to handle user sessions, user logins, and registrations was pretty much the same. So what we did is we developed a set of services, fairly reusable services, packaged them up into a platform and opened them up through as APIs. It made them available for different client-side environments. And what the net effect of this was basically a universal backend that could be used to develop either mobile or desktop applications. And at this point, the services that we provide, they range anywhere from user service, which handles user registrations, logins, session management, password recoveries, email confirmations, and so on, to things like data persistence, geolocation, and so on. So I'm going to give you an overview of all the services and give you an idea about the actual APIs and show you some sample applications today as well. But the basic idea is that when you develop applications with Backendless, you do not have to worry about server-side coding at all because for the majority of it and for a lot of applications entirely, you just don't need to worry about server-side coding. Everything is available through the APIs, and those APIs are exposed through the SDKs which we provide. And at this point, we have 5 of those for iOS, Android, JavaScript, ActionScript, Windows Phone.net. But there's also REST APIs for the environments which we do not provide libraries for. Just to go over various services that make up Backendless, I'm going to start with a user service. So user service, at the first glance, is fairly trivial. It's basically just login, user registration, login, logout. But there are a lot of different scenarios that make it more complex. So for instance, some applications, well, first of all, as far as definition of the user, it could vary from one application to another. So if you think about various registration forms for the applications out there, they could be very different. And a registration form is basically a definition for a user entity. So with Backendless, you can define what those properties are that define a user. And based on that, that will basically drive the registration process. However, on top of this, there could be a lot of different things. So for instance, you may want to require email confirmation before user can log in. Or let's say if the user tries to log in several times and they fail, it could actually could mean that someone is trying to break into the application and you may want to lock that account out for some time. Or if you have different people logging in from different computers, you may want to restrict that kind of behavior and just say that only one account could be valid at any point of time. So all these scenarios are covered out of the box, and you don't need to write a single line of code to actually enable that type of behavior and business logic. And then from the client side perspective, it really is just one liner to register a user or to log in a user, and it handles pretty much everything that I just mentioned. So I'm gonna go back and forth between my PowerPoint and the samples just to give you an idea how it works. So let me show you an example for user service. And these examples are actually included into our SDK. So if you download, you'll be able to see this code and just analyze and see how it works. So as far as the user service, let me just run this guy. So fairly trivial UI. There is a login form, there is a registration form. So for the registration, I'm just going to create an account. and let's say John. So now at this point, the user is registered. And to be able to see your application, the server side of your application, there is a developer console. And I'm going to log on to just to be able to show you what's going on out there. So this is the application that I created for the examples, and every single application is identified with unique IDs. In fact, if you go to manage, you'll be able to see the application ID and the secret keys for all the environments which we support. So inside of the code that I just ran, I have embedded those these IDs in there to identify this particular application. So as far as the actual user, so right here, this is the user properties, and you can specify what the properties are which are valid for a given application. Once the user registers, you can actually see the registered users if you go to data, and here it is. So here's this John that I just created an account for. So if I go back, just demonstrate how the login works, it's fairly trivial. And the user is logged in. But let me show you what it actually means from the API perspective. So for the user example, and this is all JavaScript right here using our JavaScript library. So registering a user, as you can see, it really is just one line of code. So you create a user object, and we provide the API for that. It's backendless.user. You populate all the properties for that user object with the values, and then make this call, and that's pretty much it. It registers the user and kicks in any additional business rules that you might have configured. And the same is true for the login. So it's really just a one line of code to handle the login. And at this point, the user identity is established and the session kicks in. But as far as the business rule configuration, if you go into the user service, let me just give you a kind of rundown. So for instance, if you want to enable email confirmation, you just turn it on right here. And anytime a user registers, an email is going to go out requesting that user to confirm the email address. As far as the login, let's say if you want to enable multiple logins, you turn it on and you can say how many different users can log in from different computers. Or if you don't want multiple logins, you just say they're turned off, and then which user needs to be logged out when it happens. So as far as the user lockout, if you want to say that whenever there are 3 unsuccessful logins, that particular account would have to be locked out, and then it's going to remain locked for this period of time. As far as security and restrictions, you can define different application roles and specify what each individual role can or cannot do, but I'm not going to worry with this information. So at this point, just kind of wanted to show you what the user registration and how the user registration and login works. So going back to my presentation, the next service is data service. Data service handles all of the persistence issues. And the way it works is you don't need to know anything about SQL, store procedures, schema, and so on. But if you do know it, it definitely will help. However, in the most trivial case, the way it works is that you basically create an instance of an object that basically you want to persist, and you use our API to save it in Backendless. But what Backendless does is it checks if there is a table corresponding to the type of object or the class that you are persisting. And if it's not there, it will create a table on the fly. And for every single property which exists in that particular object, it will create a corresponding column and persist the data in there. And using the APIs, you can query the data, update objects, delete objects, and so on, but you work at the object level. It also supports relationships. So if you have a complex type that references some other complex type or a collection of those, you can still save that object, and Backendless will recognize that and create multiple tables with the appropriate relationships between them. So let me show you an example of how the persistence service works. So here I have a classic to-do from the to-do MVC example. So let's say I'm going to create a to-do item, which is shopping. So at this point, an item is created, and if I go to my application, I'm going to have a table called task, and then here you can see there is a record with the time when it was created, which is basically corresponds to my to-do item. And if I create another one, say pick up kids from school. So I refresh this, there's going to be two items. And if one of them, let's say, is marked as done, then you will see that right here in the completed section, now shopping is done. And you can actually edit data right here from the console, and you can go and customize the schema and permissions for your data. So if you go into schema, right here it will show you all the columns which currently exist for the table task. You can see the data types, you can assign default values, and you can assign sharing for different versions. And I can talk about versioning if we have time a little bit later, but versioning is actually right there. There is also permissions. You can assign permissions for various roles and identify who can do what as far as roles-based security or user-based security. So for all the users which exist in the application, you can assign specific roles. So here's the permission matrix. Let me show you that from the coding perspective. Here's my the script for the to-do app, and right here I defined a class called task, and you can see the actual name of the task is called title. So to create an instance of this class, it's just a one line of code, backendless.persistence.off, and you put in the class name, and then you say save. And if you want to delete it, it's once again just one line of code. To get a list of all the to-do items, once again just one line, and it gives you a collection of all the task objects right there. But there is this find operation also can accept a query object, which you can use to customize the query, and we support a very similar to SQL, sort of an SQL variation to define what you're looking for and which objects need to be retrieved. And since this API is available for all environments, it's very easy to create an application, let's say for iOS, which would be a native app that works in tandem with a JavaScript application and work on top of exactly the same data, because the API really provides that abstraction for data to be shared. Let me continue with those services. Audio video, it's not, since we're talking about JavaScript, it's not really applicable, but we do support it for iOS and ActionScript environments. But since it's at this point it's not available and applicable to JavaScript, I'm just going to skip that part of the presentation. File service is available though, and the way it works is with Backendless. When you create an account and subscriptions, there is a free plan for that. There is a file system allocated for every single application that you can work with to upload files, create directories. Once the file is uploaded, a unique URL is assigned, and you can share that file with other users in your application. There's also Git front end for the file storage, so you can deploy files into that application using Git. And once you commit it, they're out there, and all the users can see those files, or you can synchronize with the repository and just get everything that is out there. There's a special directory in the file service called web. Anything you put into that directory is served by a web server. So we're working on adding an ability to customize the domain name and map it to that particular folder, so you can just host your applications right off of Backendless, and both the client side to be served up and clearly the backend infrastructure as well. To give you an example of how that file service works, I have an example of that. So right here, if I'm going to select a file, so let me just go with our logo. So I'm uploading this file into Backendless. It assigned this URL, and I can see it right here. So here's it just fetched from there. But inside of the console, if I go to the files section, here's my directory structure, and in test folder, there's going to be the file that I just uploaded. If I click on this, it just fetches the file right there as well. So you can just browse this directory structure. Web is the folder, the special folder that I was talking about for serving up web content through the web folder. Media, if you were to upload video files, they will immediately become for streaming. And we're actually adding support as far as JavaScript is concerned. We're adding support for live HTTP streaming. So that's something that will be available fairly soon as well. Going back to the example, we can browse the uploaded files, select and delete and so on. So all those APIs are available. And once again, as far as the actual API, it is also a one-liner. So for instance, uploading a file, that's what it takes. You designate a folder, you have the list of files, and you specify the callback that is executed once the files are uploaded. Deleting your files, that's also, here's the API for that. So we try to go with the most kind of user-friendly approach as far as the API is, trying to simplify it to the maximum, yet without removing some of the core functionality that developers would want. Let's continue with this. Geolocation. So geolocation is an interesting one. The way it works, if we go back to the console, right here is the front end for the geolocation. And what you can do here is you can upload various points of interest expressed as geopoints. And every geopoint really is a combination of latitude and longitude, just a pair of coordinates. However, what makes it very powerful is that you can attach metadata for every single geopoint. And metadata is a collection of key value pairs, completely free form. You define what the keys are, you define what the values are. Once it is out there, and it is actually just a JSON object. So once you put geopoints out there, and you can import data right there from the console. So here it is, just drag a CSV file with all of it, and it goes out there. There you get the API where you can query geolocation service. And when you query the service, you can say you're interested to get all the points of interest within certain radius from wherever you are, or from a certain point, that and on top of this, provide additional query for the metadata. So for instance, in this particular case, the metadata is fairly simple. The key is city, and the value is just the name of that city. However, imagine a service like, for instance, if you want to create something like Yelp, where you have, let's say, restaurants. The metadata could be type of business, restaurant, cuisine, French, Asian, whatever. So you can easily say, I'm looking for all the points of interest within 5 miles radius, looking for all the French restaurants with a rating 5-star or above. So something like creating something like this would be trivially simple. And then Backendless just gives you a list of all those geopoints that you can render on the map and so on. But you can attach those geopoints with, let's say, data sitting in data service to provide additional data about those points of interest and so on. And we have a fairly trivial, but as far as actually browsing this metadata, so you can just, as you move the map, it loads all those geopoints and renders them right here. And if you click on one, it just shows the metadata and the coordinates. I do have an example to show this particular APIs in action, and it's called City Search. Now notice I'm running these examples directly from my file system. So we have actually done a few things to make it easier to work with Backendless, where you don't have to have a local web server. So all the cross-origin requests are actually handled right there in a secure way. So right here, since I loaded it from the file system, it could not determine my coordinates, but still I can run those queries. So if I set the radius and click search, a request goes out there, and it's going to bring all the cities from this particular coordinates within this radius. So right now we have done an update today, but haven't put all the indexes on the database. That's why those queries are a little bit slow. But once the index is there, it is actually blazingly fast. So if you change the radius and rerun the query, it's going to come back with all the geopoints matching this particular query. So from the coding perspective, the way this works is this is what it takes to run a query. So you specify the geoquery object, which is right here. So you say my coordinates are this and this. The units that I'm working with could be kilometers or miles or yards, whatever. And then you can also specify the categories for geopoints that you're looking for, which is an additional dimension. And then when you run the query, right here, you specify the function which will be invoked once the data comes back, and asynchronously, once it comes back, you can just do whatever with those with the data that you get. And here it is, in on result, you just go through and render this data. You can see it right here. All right, let's continue. Publish subscribe messaging, and as far as time, I think I still have a little bit of time. Jesse, if I'm going over, please let me know, and I'll just stop and we can go into questions. But I'm almost done. So publish subscribe messaging is one of the most powerful features, and conceptually the way it works is that we provide the API where you can publish any kind of messages, and it could be just a primitive value, string, complex type, array, JSON object. It doesn't really matter. So you publish that message into a channel, and you can attach additional metadata to that message expressed as headers. And headers, once again, key value pairs, can be absolutely any data type. And there's also API where you can subscribe to receive messages. And when you subscribe to receive messages, you can also say, well, I'm interested in any message that is published into that channel. Or you could say, I'm interested only in the messages that have such and such headers, or where the header value is greater than so and so. So you basically have a descriptive language that would allow you to turn on filtering for the messages that you want to receive. And by applying these APIs, and keep in mind that they're available across the board for all environments, you can create very powerful applications, starting from something as simple as chat, where, let's say, users in the browser with a JavaScript application can chat with Android users or iOS users or Windows Phone users and so on, to something where you just broadcast messages and notify users when something happens, or creating games, whatever, wherever you need immediate real-time response and interaction, this APIs would work fantastically. Now, there's also an example for this, and it is going to be chat, because it's probably one of the most trivial ways to demonstrate these APIs. So right here, I'm going to say, well, my name is Mark. I'm going to start chat. Just send a chat message. So here I have both publisher and subscriber in the same application. By switching to the console, if I go to messaging, you can see that here's my default channel, and this is the message that was just published. So from here, if I chat to myself, but let's say the publisher is sysadmin, to publish this message into this channel, and right here in the chat, we see that that message is out there as well. So it's very trivial, but it kind of gets the point across. So from the API perspective, as far as chat is concerned, once again, this is the API to create a subscription. So you specify the channel, the method that is invoked whenever messages arrive, and there's some various subscription options. And here's how you publish a message. So once again, publish, you identify the channel and the value of the message, and that's pretty much it. Very, very simple, yet quite powerful APIs. Now, finally, a variation of publish subscribe messaging is support for push notifications. So as far push notifications is a mobile-only thing, available for iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. And if you have ever programmed push notifications, the biggest challenge is that every time you need to add support for a particular type of devices, you have to do custom coding against Google, against Apple, against Microsoft. So Backendless solves this problem, and it gives you a single API where you can deliver messages to all devices connected to your application, or a group of devices. So you can basically just publish a message and say it goes out only to Android devices, or Android and iOS. So right now, from the JavaScript perspective, you can send out messages as push notifications, and we're working with a few frameworks to be able to provide an ability to do device registration. So at this point, registering the device directly from JavaScript is not available, but we're looking to PhoneGap and other things to make it possible. So from the API perspective, So from the API perspective, let's say publishing a message would look something like this: Backendless messaging publish, and you identified in the delivery options that this message goes out to all the Android devices. So that's pretty much it as far as the actual services. There are a lot of little bells and whistles here and there, but that should give you an idea about the general level of functionality that we provide with Backendless. Oh, and one other thing that I would like to mention is in the push that we did today, we added support for Node.js. So with Node.js, you can use all of the functionality that I described from the server-side perspective. So here's a little example that demonstrates a Node.js application that handles user registration. So here it just queries the user in the command line for email address, for password, and then just makes a registration call and registers that user. So for anyone who's working with Node, you just keep in mind that this functionality is available to you as well.